Back in the day, the Vikings were traveling around the world with a curiosity of what to find in other countries far away from their Nordic homeland. And let's be honest, they weren't always very nice. Nowadays, the Danes are still very interested in what is out there, but in a more friendly and respectful way. And in this episode, I'm joined by an amazing group of travelers, all with ties to Denmark. Mette Ehlers Mikkelsen is an experienced adventurer, one country away from having visited all 193 UN nations. She has a passion for exploring the world's most remote corners with her kids, and not just the normal family destinations. Traveling and working as a diplomat and with international business always went hand in hand. But her last country is North Korea, and that turned out to be a problem.
I've worked in diplomacy and defense, and they were still, you cannot go, it's not compatible. And then I was like, okay, but even though I literally found I had the job of my dreams, but it was still a life worth dream, and I really wanted to fulfill that. And if I managed to do it, I might become the first Danish woman to visit every country in the world. And I would love to be able to use that for something meaningful, empowering women.
So she decided to quit an otherwise amazing job and continue to pursue her dream of being the first Danish woman to visit every country. Thor Pedersen is the first person in the world to visit every country without flying and doing it in one unbroken journey, completing this remarkable trip over almost a decade.
My wife and I got married online. We processed the paperwork, and she was able to come to Hong Kong. And then we tried to see if this was valid in Denmark, and they were laughing at us. You were not in the same room. You're not in the same time zone.
After he completed the quest, his focus is on family, friends, and new adventures, speaking engagements, his first book, and later this year, 2025, a documentary movie called The Impossible Journey. His full name is Thor C. Pedersen, but most of the world know him as Thor from Once Upon a Saga. Cathrine Krogh, a fearless globetrotter, has a unique approach to making travel both meaningful and impactful. She's always had a curiosity to visit other cultures, but her real travel lust started when she became a member of the Danish travel club, De Bereistes Klub.
Suddenly a motorbike comes up, and then suddenly I'm staring into a gun. But you never know how you react, and I totally reacted by instinct, so I started to fight.
At this point, she'd been to 164 countries, and 90% of the time she travels independently and often as a solo traveler. Fenger, an avid traveler, is full of great stories and tips from his adventures. He's born in what is now Zimbabwe, grew up in Denmark, and spent most of his adult life in Florida, and even became a US citizen. When he retired, he set up base in Lisbon and started traveling a lot more, so much that not even I can keep up with him.
Why keep working? Because now it would only be for money. And I was not really interested in that, because what do we lose when we work? When we don't have to, we lose time.
So far, he's been to 96 UN nations, but with the pace he's moving, he's probably gonna pass my 127 pretty soon. And finally, the half-Dane, Per Besson. He grew up in Oregon, USA, with a Danish mother and an American father. He holds a bachelor's degree in international relations with a concentration on the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe. And he fluently speaks Portuguese, Spanish, Italian, French, German, Danish, Chinese, and a fair bit of Russian. When I was traveling with him in Ukraine in October 23, I swear I also overheard him in a conversation in Ukrainian, at least enough to impress me. He has made a point of learning at least a few words from the language of every single country he visited until he reached country number 193, Colombia, in 2019.
And every day I woke up just feeling this wave of gratitude. And gratitude pushes out anxiety, it pushes out fear, it pushes out anger. And I felt gratitude when I arrived in Colombia, and that gratitude overflowed over 3 weeks. And I just felt so lucky, so fortunate to do something I never imagined as a small child I would ever do. I finally went to all the countries in the world.
Per has agreed to be my co-host for this episode and will add his unique perspective and passion for travel as we dive into the stories. So, counting myself, we're 5.5 Dane. My name is Palle Bo, and this is the Radio Vagabond, a roundtable chat with some of Denmark's top travelers.
Meet Palle Bo on an epic journey around the world. This is the Radio Vagabond.
Before we start, let me remind you that this episode is supported in part by Hotels25.com. It's a website that helps you find the best deals on hotel rooms, guest houses, and hostels all over the world. Just go to Hotels25.com and make a simple search. First, Per, thank you for agreeing to be my co-host on this.
Thank you.
You do speak quite some Danish, so we could have done it in Danish, but for you and the international audience we are going to do it in English. So, Per, what is your ties to Denmark?
Well, I think I'm one of those unusual people that speak Danish, though I've never lived in Denmark.
Yeah.
And it's what has become for me a sort of a secret language. I can speak with a small elite group of 5 million people, including my mom. And so I can trash talk people in Danish with my mom around the world, except in Denmark. And I've been very lucky growing up in Oregon, in the U.S. Every Christmas was Danish Christmas. Danish
on the
flags
24th.
On the 24th. Danish flags are on the Christmas tree. Risalamand, and this anxiety to get the almond gift, the mandelgave. And my entire life has been dominated, culturally speaking, in terms of Christmas, around the Danish cultural traditions.
Mm-hmm. So I guess your mom, who's from Denmark, when did she move to the U.S.?
She actually left Denmark when she was 20, was an au pair girl in Germany. Then she stayed there.
You were born in Germany?
I was born in Germany, saw my passport,
yeah.
And met my father, who was a retired naval officer. He was a patient at the dental clinic. My mom was quite a bit younger. He was 54, she was 27. She convinced him to end his bachelorhood, and when I was 4, moved to Oregon.
So you grew up speaking Danish to your mom. I guess you thought that was cool, and your friends thought that was cool.
I tell you, when you move to a homogenous place like suburban Portland, Oregon, when mom speaks Danish to you, like in the supermarket or around their friends, say, "Mom, stop that! It's weird.
Stop it!"
And that was inauspicious beginnings of language learning. Later on, I'm sort of shamelessly learning all types of new languages. But beginning, you just want to be conformist. You want to be just like the other kids. Mom, stop talking Danish.
And the first time we met, that was at an event I think it was a Travel Massive event or something similar in London, and you were standing in the hallway with your name tag saying Per, and it's such a Danish name, so I just went up and said Dag, which means hi in Danish, and you responded in Danish, and that's how we got to know each other.
It's very interesting because I think if I wasn't named Per, my life would have a different trajectory. Although at the time, to be quite honest, I like comic books. I like Marvel comic books. And I really wished that my mom, instead of calling me Per, would have called me Thor. Because that was the god of lightning, the god of thunder. Because every year, first day of class, my last name is Besson. So first or second student, they look at my name. Per Besson. I'd raise my little hand and I'd say it's Per. And people say, Per? Oh, like the fruit. Oh. For years and years, I said, Mom, why couldn't I be Thor?
And you've lived in 10 countries, and you speak a ton of languages. Mm-hmm. How many?
I would say I lived in 10 countries, and in those 10 countries, there are probably 7, 8 languages. Some duplicates like Portugal, Brazil, or Argentina, Spain. And I've lived them long enough to be able to speak the languages well, and the Spanish was the first Latin language. After that, you got Portuguese, and Italian and French, and then 7 years in China. And then after I finished all the countries, 193, I was in a moment of like looking for a new goal. And I said the next mountain to climb will be Russian language. And that became very timely now in the last few years, following the situation in Russia and Ukraine. Before that invasion happened, I traveled a lot in Russia again, Central Asia, Caucasus. And for me, language is about taking away a barrier between people and having a normal conversation and learning from them, sharing stories back and forth, and really bringing people closer.
Yeah, I always say if I could choose one superpower, it would be to speak any language. Yeah, and we did a trip to Ukraine, and it was so helpful having you because you could switch between Russian and Ukrainian, and so very, very helpful.
Good evening. My name is Bond.
Radio Vagabond. If travel is your passion and you want escapism while still upholding your work and family responsibilities, you can travel vicariously from the comfort of your own home. This is the Radio Vagabond Podcast.
So we're at the Extraordinary Travel Festival that just ended last night. What was the highlight for you?
Well, for me, it was meeting all these amazing people, because we all are travelers, and there was 250 people here, and we travel in 250 different ways. And just listening to those stories, and because in my mind, there's no right way, there's no wrong way. There's only your way that matters, right? So if you want to travel with pink Crocs, go for it. Because who are we to judge, right? There's a reason to that person travels with 40 kilo on her back, right? Let her do it. And I think that's one of the takeaways from travel, that I think we need to look at ourselves sometimes and not judge other people, because who are we to judge?
Mm-hmm.
For me, it was to meet people I've been friend with on social media for many years, and then finally meet face to face. That was amazing.
And for you, Thor, Torbjørn,
I was wondering what would be a highlight. I mean, it's a really unique event. I've never been to Comic-Con, but I've seen things on TV, and I imagine that this would be the equivalent of Comic-Con, but for travel enthusiasts.
Yeah,
and
a bunch of geeks.
But it's a really interesting community to take part in. So overall, there were many highlights. I think the top highlights for me were a number of the keynote speakers. I think there were some really talented and amazing personalities up on stage, sharing their stories, and I was moved by a lot of it.
Yeah. Now, we heard that, Per, you've been to every country in the world, and so have you, Thor. We'll get into that. Mette, you're one country short, and you've been that for a while.
Oh,
yeah, why don't you just go there, Mette?
Come on.
Get it over with.
I like to drag it along. It makes the whole
suspense.
anticipation and suspense.
It's like drama.
Bigger.
It's what we call dramatic pause.
It may be a bit too long, that dramatic pause for my taste. Normally, I have a lot of perseverance. My patience, on the other hand, is not my strong suit. No, I'm trying to reach every country in the world. Yes, I do like one. I like North Korea. I visited the demilitarized zone, actually with all 3 kids.
And that doesn't count.
It does not count. It doesn't count in Nomad Mania. It does not count in the Danish Travel Club. I don't think it counts because I didn't get a visa. I didn't cross the border properly. I didn't sleep. I didn't meet people and interact with people. In North Korea, that's going to be difficult anyway, but still. So even the fact that we were...
I went on a pub crawl in Pyongyang. Yeah.
Somehow, that's where I would like the most to be on a pub crawl in the entire world.
They shut the borders during the pandemic, and unlike any other country, they never really reopened them.
No, they didn't reopen, actually. They started with just closing for COVID, and then they kept closed. And
unless you got a Russian passport.
Unless I get a Russian passport when I'm not going to. So that's kind of out of the question. That's at least crossing a border that I'm not going to cross in another way.
Yeah.
So no.
And it's so important for you that you want to fulfill that lifelong goal, and that have had a bit of an effect on your work situation.
Yeah, it did. Well, North Korea sort of kept the anticipation they would open soon. And that is some of the reason why I think this is so difficult and has been so difficult for me, because Eritrea opened 2 years ago now. More than 1.5 years ago, Turkmenistan opened. And they're somewhat similar in governance and everything. So we were kind of thinking, okay, now they open, so probably soon. And even this August, North Korea itself said, we're going to open in December, and then absolutely nothing happened. So now again we have one of these, maybe this will happen. No, it didn't this time either. So I keep sort of being in this situation of I'm just gonna hold it a few months longer instead of doing something else. And it did have an effect, because in February I thought I had a chance. There was sort of the marginal chance that one Swedish travel club group would be accepted to go to North Korea. And Sweden have somewhat of a special relationship with North Korea. They have an embassy there. It was a fair chance that if anyone from Western Europe would be let in, they were the ones. So I literally quit my job, because my job then decided I could not go.
Because you work in diplomacy?
I worked in diplomacy and defense. Yeah. Always as a civilian.
Yeah.
I was doing portfolio management, so it was not that sophisticated in that way. But it was portfolio management, and they were still, you cannot go, this is too dangerous.
It's not compatible.
It's not compatible. That was actually the exact words. And then I was like, okay, but I want to fulfill the dream of my life, even though I literally found I had the job of my dreams. But it was still a life worth dream, and I really wanted to fulfill that. Yeah. And if I managed to do it, I might become the first Danish woman to visit every country in the world. And doing it as a divorced mom with 3 kids, that is sort of a niche travel-wise in the world that I have all to myself. And I would love to be able to use that for something meaningful, empowering women.
Yeah, so once it opens, you're going to bring your kids?
I hope so, yeah.
Speaking of which, the perspective that you're unique to deliver is, how is traveling with your children uniquely shaped your choice of travels and ventures on the road?
To me, traveling with my children is the most meaningful thing I've kind of ever done. I think I've tried to have meaningful jobs, being in diplomacy and the likes, but really giving the world to my children.
Sure.
That investment of seeing what they then learn, because they, of course, now from being the smallest individual, learn what all of us around this table have learned, that people are fundamentally kind and helpful, and you can, to a large degree, trust them. They'll be hospitable. They also understand that pretty much everything people do has a meaning. There's a logic behind it. So even if we're laughing a bit, Turkmenistan, all the houses are white, all the cars have to be white, they have to be clean. But then when you come and you realize this is, well, a rich country with the gas, but beside that, it's a somewhat poor country. It's a dusty, huge desert. So if you want to build the most amazingly prestigious capital that you want to be really proud of course it has to be white marble in the middle of this desert, with white, clean cars washed by water in the middle of this dusty desert, and preferably with green trees in the middle of this desert. So they have seen all of that. They understand. So I think and I hope that when they started to become engineers and doctors and diplomats and whatever they're now studying for, that they will use that to basically help create a better world, because I have an understanding that we can reach somewhat mutual solution to climate change and whatever we want to set our minds to.
I very much like your answer, this idea of passing your values to someone who's really there listening year after year. The move towards motherhood or fatherhood, that opportunity to distill all information you've learned, many years of traveling, many years of working, and little by little you see drip, drip, those values come into your child. That's some of the most meaningful moments in our life, in seeing your values, yourself reflected in the next generation you have. So thanks for sharing that.
And when in the beginning of my journey in 2016 and 17, my youngest daughter had a gap year. She was planning to go to university after that and study law. And then she came traveling with me for 4 months through Asia, and we even went to North Korea together. And then when she came back, she was so fascinated by the different way that people live that she changed the whole direction and ended up studying anthropology instead, because she was so fascinated by the different ways that people live. So that was truly a life-changing trip for her.
Grab your passport, come along for the ride. The world is a stage, no place to hide. He's the radio vagabond, always grooving, stories worldwide. The mic keeps proving, from the mountains high to the ocean soothing. Life's an adventure, gotta keep moving.
Cathrine, should I say Catherine?
Whatever you...
Yeah, Cathrine, you've traveled to 164 countries.
Yes.
What's been the most transformative experience for you?
Oh, wow, what a question.
Thank you.
I think it's just the fact that I will repeat, Mette, that people around the world, we are human beings, wherever you are a tribe in the desert or so, you have desires, dreams for your kids, for yourself. So, and experience that people are kind and helpful everywhere.
Mm-hmm. And you travel most of the time solo?
Yeah.
A lot of people, they say, oh, I can't travel solo, I'm a woman.
Yeah, well, that's not true, in my opinion.
No. But you did have a dramatic experience in Guatemala.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I was held at gunpoint. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I was walking in Antigua, this beautiful old colonial-style city in Guatemala, going into Parque Central to meet people for a sundowner. I was walking in this street, very little light, very few people, in fact no people. And suddenly a motorbike comes up with two young men on, and the backseat guy, he jumped off, tried to grab my bag, and then suddenly I'm staring into a gun. And I would always tell people, please just give your values. There's nothing that is worth fighting for. But you never know how you react. And I totally reacted by instinct. So I started to fight.
No way.
Yeah.
Real Viking.
Yeah. Very stupid Viking. Yeah, so I kicked, I shouted, I screamed, I spit. And then he jumped backwards and I continued like crazy.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And then suddenly he jumped back on the motorbike and they left. I still had my bag.
Wow.
Yeah, but then afterwards the reaction came, so I started shaking, crying, and in the fight I had a wound, so a little bit of blood coming down, and some local people came and, what happened? Oh my God.
So do you see yourself as a before Cathrine and after Cathrine after that incident?
No, I think now I'm able to laugh at it and tell good stories around the table, and
Thor, you talked about this in your talk yesterday, and you had something similar happen where you had a gun to your face.
Well, yeah, the similar point would be... Well, so in my case, it was in a jungle. There was no one around. There were 3 men that were armed, and they were drunk, and they were emotional, and with fingers on the trigger, and they were highly aggressive. So my fight or flight response, if it had been fight, then I would have been dead, I'm sure. There's no way with 3 men. But yeah, so that was a long night, and that was a traumatic experience which still sits with me today.
Still.
But I can tell the story today and not feel any real emotion. I can act out the emotion and so on. So we were doing a documentary film which will be out next year. And I tell this story in the film. And we were doing interviews for that. So cameras on me and tell the story, tell it again, tell it a little bit differently, can you so and so. And then suddenly in the process of telling that story, I started shaking and my heartbeat went up and I could feel that my eyes were watering up and suddenly I was just back in the situation. So I know I still have something there that I need to deal with at some point.
Yeah. Yeah, you need to do that. But you've achieved something truly incredible. Visiting every country in one unbroken journey completely without flying, and you thought you could do it in maybe 4 years.
3.5 if I went fast.
Yeah, and you were almost done, and then the pandemic hit, and you were stuck in Hong Kong, and that's when we really started connecting. You were on my podcast back then, and you were also on a Lego art podcast, where you told some great stories of you being a Viking in
good times.
Yeah, he was a Viking in Legoland.
No, I was a pirate.
Pirate. Sorry, pirate. Yeah, you were a pirate in Legoland.
Which is almost better, I think.
So just walking around with a Lego sword saying, "Arr!"
Good times.
Yeah, but some truly amazing stories. And then once you were able to leave Hong Kong, you managed to finish it, and it's like 6 months ago or so.
Yeah, so I came back in July 2023, so it's about a year and a half
my God.
now.
Time flies.
But, so it feels like 100 years for me. But the interesting thing about having come back home in July last year, and that it's about a year and a half now, is that I have, at this point, not been back from that project as long as I was stuck in Hong Kong.
No.
And I think that puts the stay in Hong Kong in perspective.
Yeah. So you managed to get all the way back to Denmark without flying, and we're now in Bangkok, and I take it that you flew here.
I did, yeah.
What was it like getting on an airplane for the first time after?
My first flight was soon after I came back to Denmark, and I hadn't been on an airplane for almost 10 years. And my mother's from Finland, so flew up to Finland together with my wife to see my mother. And going to the airport, I could feel something was wrong, and coming inside the terminal.
I feel like you're committing a sin.
It was this like really strong feeling of I'm too stupid to understand what the consequences are in regards to what I'm about to do. I should speak to someone who's smarter, who can see, no, don't get on that plane because, but I couldn't work out what the because was. And then I was going through it, going like, no, you have been through all the countries, you have made it back home, there's no reason why you can't get on this plane. You come inside, you go through security, and it gets more and more intensified. I'm just, I shouldn't be here, there's something wrong. And you're called to the gate, and you're waiting, and you go on board the plane, and you buckle your seats, and you're sitting there, and I'm going like, this is my last chance to run off this airplane and get out of here. There's a reason why I shouldn't be here, but I can't see why. And then finally, we get on the runway, and I'm going like, okay, now it's almost game over. I guess I could, open the doors and jump out, but it's almost over. And then when we were in the air, I calmed down, and there was no turning back now. It was over, and it felt like a really clear cut for me. Like maybe the project was actually truly over, not when I returned back to Denmark, but the first time I was airborne, that there was something about that going like, okay, now it's definitively over.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I flew here, which was 8 hours, which was then the longest flight I've had for more than a decade. Well, the flights I've had have been 1 hour, 1.5 hours, and so on. But 8 hours, my goodness, I don't miss it at all.
No, of course not.
No.
Yeah.
So one question. So it seems like in those years, then you associated flight with failure, or giving up your dream.
Oh, that's a great point.
And did you maybe you've had nightmares of like actually getting on a plane, coming back with your tail between your legs? I failed. So getting on that flight seems like
that's really good insight. I think you're right. I haven't had nightmares about being on airplanes throughout that journey, but I have had nightmares or dreams where I suddenly found myself back in Denmark, and then with friends, and everything's fine, and then suddenly I realized, I'm still missing 25 countries. I'm not supposed to be here. And how did I end up here? And can I sneak out of the country and people, they won't? So I've had that kind of, it was really, really deeply rooted inside my system, and it still is. I came back home last year, and busy times, lots of interviews, lots of attention, lots of opportunities. And then maybe after 6 months, I was doing something ordinary, brushing my teeth, I guess. And then I heard a voice. And the voice was a male voice. It was in English, and it wasn't my voice. And it said, don't give up, don't give up, don't give up. And I was like, just brushing my teeth and going like, what? Don't give up what? And where's that voice coming from? And am I finally going crazy? And then I started wondering is that something related to the project that I was really trying not to give up for so many years? And then now, but why is it popping up now? And then a couple of months later, I was tying my shoelaces and then it was there again. Don't give up, don't give up, don't give up. Enough with this. What's the point of what's going on here? What is this? I haven't heard that voice for a very long time.
It's interesting. You give new meaning to the phrase fight or flight. Yeah. It's fight on or flight back. So that fight or flight dichotomy creates this constant state of tension. Fight or flight is usually you fight, in your case, Cathrine, or you run away and then the tension goes down. You had constant tension.
Yeah.
Fight on or fly back during so many years. So for the system of the body, that is so much stress for so many years. Fight or flight.
Yeah. So when you were in Hong Kong, wasn't it also so that they were sort of saying at some point you cannot stay?
Yeah.
And if you cannot stay, we're not allowing you to sail somewhere else. Yeah. We'll put you on a plane.
Yeah, this is very true. Yeah. I wanted to succeed with that project, and it had to be an unbroken journey. It all had to be without flying, and that meant that if it's an unbroken journey, it's in one go. So the closer you get to the end, the more stressful it gets, because if something goes wrong, you have to do it all over again, right? And what could go wrong? Well, a family member. So there could be a family emergency that weighs out that, okay, I have to leave this and go home. And the longer it takes, the bigger the risk was for that. Deportation was definitely another one. So if, for whatever reason, you go to a country and you upset government and they decide to deport you, are they going to take you to the land border or are they going to take you to the airport? So I was worried about this. And that became even more of an issue when you start going to island nations, because they're not going to go through the hassle of securing a vessel for you. They'll take you straight to the airport. And a lot of immigration services around the world on islands, they want to see, how are we going to get out of here? And many times I would show up and go, I'll find a way. I'm good at it. I've done it for a long time, but that's not good enough for immigration. So particularly with Hong Kong was locked in. The border between Hong Kong and mainland China was closed for 3 years, and I managed to leave after 2 years. But in those 2 years, in the beginning, immigration was, very helpful. Everyone understood this is a unique situation for the world. This is a pandemic. Let's see what happens. We need vaccines. We need this and so on. So, but 11 months down the line, there must be airplanes to Denmark. I'm sure there are. But if I do that, I'm missing 9 countries and go like, well, we will give you shorter and shorter extensions until there are no more extensions, and then you're deported, and that will be on an airplane. So I was feeling I was at risk of, losing out on achieving what I set out to do. 9 countries from getting over the finish line.
You could smell it.
And I mean, I think I'm generally a good person, and I try to behave in a nice and polite way and not break the law and so on. But I was even more so trying not to upset anyone and be friends with everyone and, for a long time.
And I understand you started to work for the Danish Seamen's Church or something. You got a work visa. That's how you saved yourself.
So after about 11 months, I had this conversation with immigration where they said, listen, this is what's going to happen. We are going to deport you eventually. And I go like, oh, you can't. What can we do? And they go, well, you could marry someone in Hong Kong. I thought that seems a little drastic. Like, well, you could also maybe start studying and get a student visa. Well, that's, that was a possibility. I wouldn't have to study, really. I could just sign up for something, right? And then they say, you get a job. And there are about 300 Danish people in Hong Kong. And I met all of them, I guess. and it's a great network. And some of them are really active in the Danish community. So with the Danish Chamber of Commerce and with the Danish Seamen's Church. So they said, we could hire you. We actually need someone at the Danish Seamen's Church. and we'll give you the job. You'll be the junior assistant to the reverend. And usually it's like some 20-year-old that comes over for 6 months. That has
like
that.
intern.
Yeah, intern. Well, that's fine. And that came with privileges. So there was no one else there. I was an assistant to nobody. So everyone had gone home for the pandemic. Right? So I had the assistant's car. I had the reverend's car. I had the reverend's apartment. I had the assistant's.
The church also.
I had the church. And, so I had 2 apartments, 2 cars. I had a travel pass, so I could travel free in Hong Kong. My only costs were food at that point. So a really good living situation. I was in two years in Hong Kong without paying rent at any point.
Oh, that's cool.
Team Denmark stood up for you.
Yeah, Team Denmark was behind me.
Yeah.
But so actually interesting through that job, because it was a really rough time for the seafarers. Really, really rough time for the seafarers. They were basically quarantined from the moment they got on board the ships. And then usually they would be on the ship for 3 or 4 months and rotate back home. But during the pandemic, some seafarers were on board for more than a year, not knowing what was going on with family or themselves and going mental. And so they couldn't leave these ships, but I could go shopping in Hong Kong and bring stuff to the ship. So I started emailing ships going like, do you need anything? I'm here. And in the beginning, they were ignoring me. But then after a while, emails started coming. They needed toothpaste and plastic plants and PlayStation games and posters and whatever you can, like e-cigarettes and all this kind of stuff. So I started shopping this and bringing it. And the seafarers have been really good to me. So I really wanted to do a good job.
Giving back. Yeah.
So I pretty much always completed the list and brought it. And then it began to rumor that Hong Kong was a place where the ships could get stuff done. So the ships, they communicate with each other internally.
Yeah, sure.
So there would come more and more of these lists, and they would be longer and longer. And it was a really good time to help these seafarers.
So did that connection to the seafarers, did that help you get on a ship eventually?
No, not at all. I had these connections with the shipping companies prior to the pandemic. And then as soon as it was possible to get back on a ship again, I was able to do so. Yeah. It was more because I had been on a lot of container ships and I had spoken to many seafarers and had many moments with these people, and I really enjoy being at sea with these guys. Mm-hmm. It was just wonderful to have an opportunity to give something back to them during the pandemic.
Yeah. We're going to get back to the conversation with the Danes in a few minutes, and when we do, Peter will tell us a crazy story of his struggles to get his Danish passport back, all because of Danish bureaucracy and the fact that he was born in what is now Zimbabwe. And since it was Rhodesia back then, the Danish authorities asked him to travel all the way down to southern Africa to see if he could find his original birth certificate.
You were born in Rhodesia, but now the country is called Zimbabwe. So we cannot process with this until you get a Zimbabwean birth certificate.
Oh, no.
It has to say Zimbabwe.
You won't believe what happened. But now we're switching gears a bit, because a few weeks ago I asked you to share your own stories of kindness while traveling. And wow, some of the messages I got are truly heartwarming. From the random acts of generosity to complete strangers going out of their way to help, these are moments that remind us that the world is full of good people. So now it's time for
The Vagabond Hotline.
Liam from Dublin, Ireland says,
Hi, Paula. I have a story of kindness. On my first solo trip, I was wandering through a tiny town in Colombia when it suddenly started pouring rain. I ducked into a small shop and the owner motioned for me to come inside. She handed me a steaming cup of hot chocolate and insisted I sit with her family until the storm passed. We ended up chatting through hand gestures and laughter for nearly an hour. When I finally got up to pay for the drink, she just waved her hand and said, "Amigo, welcome." That moment made me feel at home in a place I'd never been before.
I got this one from Maya from Cape Town, South Africa.
I was backpacking through Japan when I lost my wallet on a crowded train in Tokyo. I had no cash, no cards, nothing. Just as I was starting to panic, an older woman who had been sitting across from me quietly walked over, handed me a small envelope, and bowed. Inside was the equivalent of about $50 in yen, just enough to get me through the next day. I tried to refuse, but she just smiled and said in broken English, "For you, traveler." I still carry that empty envelope in my journal as a reminder of her kindness.
And finally, Rachel Thompson from Denver, Colorado.
I was stranded at a crowded bus station in Istanbul just as the sun was setting. I had been traveling all day, exhausted, carrying my heavy backpack and trying to figure out how to get to my hostel. But then, my phone died. No map, no translation app, no way to navigate the maze of unfamiliar streets. I must have looked completely lost because a young man, probably in his early 20s, approached me with a curious expression. In hesitant English, he asked, "You need help?" Relieved, I showed him the address of my hostel on a crumpled piece of paper. He studied it for a moment, then nodded and gestured for me to follow him. I assumed he was just pointing me in the right direction, but instead, he walked with me. For the next 20 minutes, we weaved through the bustling streets, past market stalls and glowing shop signs. Every now and then, he stopped to double-check a street name or ask a shopkeeper if we were heading the right way. We didn't talk much. His English was limited, and my Turkish was non-existent. But there was something comforting about the quiet determination in his help. Finally, we reached my hostel. I turned to thank him, fumbling in my pocket for some money as a small token of appreciation. But when I held it out, he shook his head with a smile. "Guests are a gift in my country," he simply said. And just like that, he waved and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. That small act of kindness from a stranger in a foreign land stayed with me. Proof that sometimes the most unexpected moments of generosity are the ones that redefine how we see the world.
Wow. Thanks, guys, for sharing. You know, one of the things that I love most about traveling is the people I meet along the way. Like the time I made friends with a local butcher in the small town Tisnit in the southern part of Morocco. When I got sick with pneumonia and needed to go to the hospital, he closed down his shop and went with me to help translate. He even insisted on paying for my hospital bill, even though I tried to explain that I had travel insurance that would cover that. Or the time I was in Saudi Arabia and a random stranger paid for my shopping because they didn't accept MasterCard or Visa. Both of these stories are described in previous episodes of the Radio Vagabond. And things like that happen to me all over the world. Strangers who surprise me with their unexpected kindness. Small moments that stick with you long after your trip is over. What's your favorite story of surprising kindness from your travels? Please let me know and I'll share it in a future episode. In the next Vagabond Hotline, I'm looking for funny, lost in translation moments. Because language barriers can lead to some of the funniest, most embarrassing, or just plain confusing moments. Like the time I thought I was ordering a small sandwich in Japan, but thanks to a mix-up, I somehow ended up with a family-sized feast. Or the time that I confidently used a phrase I learned, only to find out that it meant something very different. Have you ever had moments where a simple translation mistake led to a hilarious or awkward situation? Maybe you accidentally insulted someone ordering something completely different, or just stood there confused while the locals laughed. Share them with me by going to theradiovagabond.com/contact or send me a DM on Instagram @RadioVagabond. And note that I really prefer voice messages, so I don't have to have an AI voice read them like I did here. theradiovagabond.com/contact.
And that was the Vagabond Hotline.
Through every border, across every land, with with his mic in his pocket and the world in his hand. His name is Bond, the radio vagabond, as I said. Gotta keep moving.
Peter, we met in March, I think. We were both signed up for the trip to Syria with Nomad Mania, and then we met in Buenos Aires before. And I didn't know you before, but then it turned out that we are from the same town in Denmark. We actually went to the same school.
Randers.
Randers.
Yeah.
But you're born in Zimbabwe. You lived most of your life in Florida. And now you're based in Lisbon, and you retired from your work, and that is when your traveling really kicked off.
I don't know if, I definitely have traveled a lot the last couple of years, but I always traveled. But of course, having a family, having your own business, your travel is limited.
Yeah.
Right? But...
So this year, how many countries?
Oh, probably around 50.
This year. Wow. That seems very limited.
but you know, it's planned. And what I mean with that is that back in 2000, my wife and I had just bought a house in Florida we couldn't afford. We were living the American dream. But we sat down with a financial planner because there must be more than just living the so-called American dream, right? Mm. And so we set a 20-year plan. We met that plan in 19 years. And I had a very, very good business there. But after 19 years, we met our plan financially. We said, okay, why keep working? Because now it would only be for money. And I was not really interested in that, because what do we lose when we work? When we don't have to, we lose time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right? And at my age, I don't have much time left. We don't know, but historically, statistically, right? So we sold everything, cat, house, everything, kids, grandkids, and everything almost, right? And then moved to Lisbon. And it lasted 3 weeks, and my ex-wife went back, and she really didn't like it. We had a very, very happy divorce. No issues there. She's happy, I'm happy. And that's when my dream, my 20-year plan really took effect, because now I have a small little place in Lisbon, but I can go wherever I want to go now with really no obligations to anybody, which you can't when you have a family. Right? So yes, so I'm the baby here when it comes to amount of countries we have traveled to. But we got to start somewhere. And now I'm just plugging them away one at a time, and maybe one day I will get there.
And just to put it in perspective, that you're not only just ticking off countries, you went back to Syria because you liked the trip so much. Yeah. Obviously, the next trip wasn't as great because I wasn't there.
Of course.
Yeah, but if you went back.
I did go back, and then I just extended that with other countries in the region, right?
Yeah.
But I think my purpose of traveling is, of course, meeting great people like you. But I think deep down, the main purpose I'm traveling is to try to spot extraordinary people. And what I mean with that is spot a talent, spot somebody who perhaps just need a little opportunity to excel in life. And I think, looking back, there's some people out there who is doing quite well because of that. And I'm a firm believer of giving back. We are so privileged coming from a system where we have freedom, we have education, we can go and travel the world. But never forget also, billions of people don't have those opportunities. Mm-hmm. So if we can help one person excel in life, make it different, so that person can pay back again. So I'm a firm believer in paying forward, and that's really my main objective of traveling. Yeah. Spotting those people, young people, and usually through education.
Yeah.
Right, where you help them a little bit, and then they excel, and now they can pay back to somebody else.
Yeah. So when you moved to the U.S., at some point you became an American citizen and got an American passport, and then you had to give up the Danish passport because at that point Denmark didn't allow dual citizenship. Then at some point, I think it was in 2015, it was possible to get dual citizenship in Denmark, and you wanted the Danish passport back. But you were born in Zimbabwe, and that...
No, I was born in Rhodesia, which is very important in this story.
Yeah, okay, yeah. You were born in Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe, but tell me what happened when you went to the Danish government to get the Danish passport.
So, when I became a U.S. citizen in 2000, I had to give up my Danish citizen, and I regretted it right away. I'm Danish.
Yeah.
I'm not American, right? In deep down, I'm Danish. So for 15 years, I kept looking, please, Denmark, open up, open up. In 2015, they opened up the process for people like me who have given up their Danish citizenship, right? So quickly filled out all the paperwork, and now we come to one of the Danish typical things. And Mette, you can probably attest to that. You're a diplomat and all that, right? Fill out all the paperwork, send it in, can't wait to hear back. And I hear back from them and they said, Peter, everything is great, except one thing. You were born in Rhodesia, but now the country is called Zimbabwe. So we cannot process with this until you get a Zimbabwean birth certificate.
Oh, no.
It has to say Zimbabwe.
Yeah.
Oh,
so I
come on.
called them up and talked to some person in there.
Come on!
Exactly.
It was
That's
called
crazy,
Rhodesia
crazy.
at the time. I didn't make this up.
Right? And I said, you can't be serious. So, if you want to get your Danish passport back, you must get a Zimbabwean birth certificate. Long story short, I went down there.
You had to travel to Zimbabwe.
I traveled to Zimbabwe, bought a ticket all the way to Zimbabwe. And in the meantime, I had hooked up with somebody down there who I did not know, but through a friend, just to guide me around Hawaii, right? I go down there, and this is one of the highlights of my travel, all the years I traveled. We go to the office of this building where I can get my birth certificate. But in order to get your birth certificate, you got to get information from me. So I had my Rhodesian birth certificate and my name, the county, and then a 6-digit number at the bottom. I gave those three informations to them. Half an hour later, Mr. Fenger, I walk up to a glass booth or whatever, and in front of me, my original birth certificate, together with my older brothers, are lying right there. Imagine that.
Wow.
52 years later.
Insane.
A little
With
dusty.
all the chaos that's happened in Rhodesia,
Oh,
Zimbabwe.
yeah. Wow.
My original birth certificate. Because if I did not get this piece of paper, I could not be a Danish citizen again. Goosebumps.
Yeah.
Getting them now.
Yeah.
Right? But that's not the end of the story, because then I get it. I pay $20. I get it. But then the Danish government saying, hey, you need a stamp from the Foreign Affairs Office to authorize this certificate. Okay? Next day I go up. Through a long story I don't have to go through here. I get it. But then it's not done yet. The Danish government is saying, okay, now we just need a stamp from the Danish embassy. The problem is just there's no Danish embassy in Zimbabwe. It's in Pretoria, South Africa. Yeah. So, okay, Pastor Ray and I, we hop in his car. For 40 hours, we drive down to Pretoria, 9 minutes at the embassy, getting the stamp, and drive back again. But I tell you, of all the trips I've taken over the years, it was the best, most exciting, most thrilling, because you had no idea what was around the corner. And I was determined to get my Danish citizenship back, because why? Denmark is one of the best passports to have, right? And I only travel on my Danish passport now, never the US, unless I go back to the US.
Oh, yeah, of course.
So thank you, Denmark, for being so black and white. No gray.
Mette, I saw you rolling your eyes. You've been in the system. Is that typical Danish?
Oh, it can be but mostly I'd say when it becomes that bureaucratic, it's normally a nice way to tell people we actually don't want you.
Oh.
So if you really want something to happen normally, it's much smoother. But here I can't see why we wouldn't want Peter to get his Danish citizenship back. he is really a Dane who's just been living abroad for a while. And that was so to me that really makes no sense. I think it's slightly embarrassing.
And
actually.
everyone know that it was Rhodesia before.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
It's not your fault.
No.
You didn't change the name.
But I'm glad I went through the whole trip. It was
sure.
amazing trip. Amazing trip.
Pleasure after the suffering.
Yeah.
Can I share a story? So it's not going to be your level, but I just felt some frustrations with Danish bureaucracy after getting back home because my wife and I got married online.
You were in Hong Kong, and she could only visit you if you were married. And
Yes.
and you found this minister in Utah
It's kind of a loophole.
that could marry you on Zoom.
It was an e-minister.
E-minister, yeah. So you got married and she got down there.
We got married
so.
online. We processed the paperwork, and she was able to come to Hong Kong. And then we tried to see if this was valid in Denmark, and they were laughing at us. You were not in the same room. You're not in the same time zone like this. So we knew we had to get married again. So we got married on this in this beautiful country called Vanuatu in the Pacific. We got married on a beach. There was cake. People took photos. This was a wedding.
And you make now Kiss the Bride and all of that.
So you finally kissed the bride.
Yes, finally. And then we have the paperwork, and it's signed by a pastor, and it's all good. And then we take that to the Danish government and go like, look, we're married. I also have to add that Denmark and Vanuatu have signed the same convention, which if you should be able to transfer these documents easily. So I'm at the office with this document and go like, look, we're married in Vanuatu. We want to transfer this, so we're married in Denmark. And they go, this is not what it's supposed to look like. And I say, so tell me, what's it supposed to look like then? And then they say, well, we're not sure because we never had anything from Vanuatu before. And then I say, then how do you know this is not what it's supposed to look like?
Good point.
I go, well, this is not it. This is not it. And I go like, but tell me exactly what you want. Yeah, but we don't know that because we've never had anything from that country before. So then I say, can you hear yourself speaking? I need to know what I need to ask for. You cannot tell me because you're not had. You're telling me what I have is not the right thing, even though you've never seen what the right thing is. How do you know this is not the right thing? So, do you want to speak to someone else? So then we ended up going to, what's it called, City Hall?
Yeah.
And then we got married in Denmark properly. And
for
then
the third time.
That was the easiest thing to do.
Yeah.
But the frustration with Danish authorities, where you would think that in Denmark, you've been around the world, you've gone through all this monkey business and all this insane stuff. Think, finally back in Denmark where things just work and people are sensible.
Yeah.
And then you run into the kind of madness you did, Peter, or paperwork where they don't know what it's supposed to look like, but they're telling you it's wrong.
Yeah, but I can tell you that the Danish government, they do accept a marriage certificate from Graceland Wedding Chapel in Las Vegas. because I did that.
Happy for you.
Elvis was there.
Everybody knows Elvis. So no one knows what Vanuatu is.
In the words of the king. Yeah.
Love me tender.
Ever find yourself hitting rewind just to figure out how a podcast pulled you in?
Like, what's the magic behind a story that truly resonates?
Totally. And that's what has us so intrigued by Palabo.
Talk about an audio mastermind.
This is a guy who's been crafting compelling audio for decades.
Decades, yeah.
Yeah.
6 national awards in Denmark for Best Radio Commercial. Even snagged a finalist spot at the Cannes Lion.
Okay, Cannes Lion, that's a big deal, right?
Yeah.
Like the advertising Oscars.
You got it. So this isn't just someone who knows audio. This is someone who knows how to make you remember a message. And the real kicker, he takes those skills honed in the fast-paced world of radio and brings it all to podcasting.
I mean, look at the range of work.
And he's worked with Lego. Like, come on, that's got to be a story in itself.
It really is. You don't just stumble into working with a brand like Lego. There's a level of, I don't know, a certain something that draws those kinds of names to him.
Right. It's not like they just hand out those gigs.
See, that's what gets me. This isn't a one-trick pony. It's this understanding of how to use audio to engage any audience.
Absolutely. And not just entertain, but educate, persuade. It shows a real depth of skill, knowing how to tailor your approach for different goals, how to hold attention, how to make even potentially dry material something you'd actually want to listen to.
It really makes you wonder what stories are still waiting to be told. And how can we learn from pioneers like Palaibo to make sure those stories are heard?
Something to think about.
Let's make some audio magic together. Drop me a line and let's get started. You can see more on my company's website, radioguru.co.uk. We're almost out of time, but I'd like to ask each of you, if you could relive just one moment of your travels, what would that be and why? And let's start with you, Per.
That's a tough question. We've lived so many moments. But it all of a sudden came to me, the secret of happiness is gratitude. And I had this moment where I was overcome by this wave of gratitude when I arrived in my final country 193, Colombia, which is not a difficult...
That's not a difficult
country. Most people finish on a difficult country. They stay there 3 or 4 days and they leave.
Like North Korea.
Yeah, exactly. But I chose Colombia on purpose. I have many Colombian friends. And I wanted to sort of make a joke on them, last but not least. And I came to Colombia and I bought a book from a famous Colombian author, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, Love in the Time of Cholera. And I decided, I'm going to take this book, read it 15, 20 pages every day for the entire trip and savor the moment of being in my final country. And this is sort of testimony to a lifetime of travel. And every day I woke up just feeling this wave of gratitude. And gratitude is an emotion that, where we have a limited space for emotions in ourselves. Gratitude pushes out anxiety, it pushes out fear, it pushes out anger. And I felt gratitude when I arrived in Colombia, 3 o'clock in the morning on a flight in Avianca. And that gratitude overflowed over 3 weeks.
Wow.
And I just felt so lucky, so fortunate to do something I never imagined as a small child I would ever do. I finally went to all the countries in the world.
Mette, can you beat that?
Try.
We all have too many stories to share, really. That was a big picture story.
Yeah. I'll give you a few seconds, Cathrine.
Oh, yeah. Well, as you say, so many moments. But I guess 15 years ago, these days, I went on a bicycle trip, a peace trip in Middle East with 200 women from all over the world. We biked in Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Palestine, and it was amazing. The fun, the friendship, the kindness, the experience was magnificent.
Great.
I would love to go back.
Yeah. Mette? Oh, you're not ready yet. Peter?
She's still processing.
Buffering.
You have really already heard that story, because one of the most profound moments in my travel was I was standing in front of that clerk in Hawaii. I wanted to be Danish again. It is in my DNA. And here, that birth certificate was laying in front of me.
Yeah.
Right, and to get that back
officially
was amazing. Amazing feeling.
Yeah. Mette? Okay, I'll let you speak now.
I was thinking of a moment where I would be abroad with all 3 children, who are actually no longer that much of a children, but rather young adults. And one place that they all really, really loved was the Okavango Delta in Botswana. And we were on a trip where we would drive during the day, and then we would set up a tent and just have this sense of the desert or animals around us. And in the Okavango Delta, we had been sitting having dinner at night, and literally small scorpions had been falling down from the tree above us, and they were small and they were yellow because there were sort of no lights around it, and some of them fell on the table, some fell in the lap of my youngest daughter, and obviously her bigger brother couldn't help himself but create a major scene. He was like, "They're biting you, and they're everywhere, and they're crawly and creepy," and she was like jumping up screaming, and I was like, "Thank you very much, son.
Thank
that
you.
was really helping the situation." So we'd sort of set that out, and of course it was completely dark, and there was just a few sort of lights at the table. And then we would go sleep in the 2 different tents we had. I was with the smaller one. And then in the morning, about 6 o'clock, I heard somebody disturbing. Not that friendly in the morning before I had my coffee. So I was like, who are these annoying tourists in this group? Some of the others who started getting up. You know, I have another hour I can sleep before there's breakfast. So, you know, it just stay silent, don't move, let me sleep. And then, of course, they did wake me up. So I get out of the tent and thinking, okay, I have to go to the toilet. And there's an elephant standing between me, the tent, and sort of where I was supposed to go. I was not quite sure whether to just shush it. And then eventually it turned out to be a young male. And it turned out that there were actually about 10 young male elephants who were completely in agreement with us that this particular small green area under the trees with the shade and everything was such a wonderful area to sleep. And then there's the water around. It was a really perfect area. So it took about 45 minutes that morning before we shushed 10 young male elephants so much out of our small camp that we could actually have our morning coffee. And I no longer needed to have water in my eyes. And of course, them being at that point teenagers, my youngest daughter, who in the same tent as me, would get out and actually see the elephants, and the 2 others would come out being like, something happened?
Yeah.
I was like, oh, kidding me. But it was amazing. It was one of those trips where the tent and it all being primitive meant that we were so much together, and we had to figure out putting up the tents and everything together. And then often we would sail in canoes, and we would get too close to the hippos, and then they would start sort of charging after us, and we would sail back fast and try to get away from the hippo. Just to be cut off, that we could not sail any further because there was a group of elephants crossing the water, an entire family of them. And that whole scene of being so close to nature and it's feeling so alive was really amazing.
Amazing. And Thor, of 10 years of full-time travel, I'm sure you don't really have any good stories.
I mean, like everyone else, there's a lot. And I'm going back and forth on if it should be something in connection to my lovely ultra-wifey or something else. But I think it's something else. At least it is today. So around 2016, I was on top of a truck in Congo together with about 50 other people. And we were going for 2 days through a really bumpy, very beautiful, very dusty landscape. And it sounds nice, but it was just horrible. It was really, really painful. The dust and the heat and the humidity, and there was nothing nice about it. There wasn't, you couldn't find a comfortable position to sit in. Like, it was just very, very uncomfortable. And you could see the misery in everybody's face as we were bumping along. Well, the shadows grew long and the day was coming to an end and the sun started to set. And then there was this woman who was almost next to me. She had an empty water bottle. And she starts banging this water bottle. And then she starts singing in a local language. And it sounds really, really beautiful, and you have these amazing colors with the sun is setting and all the dust around us and a beautiful landscape. And she's singing, and then a woman next to her starts singing, and then a man, and then before I know it, everybody on this truck is singing this song in a language I do not know. And it sounds so beautiful, and it was such a serene moment, and all the misery was gone. It was just absolutely beautiful and magical for a good 10 minutes maybe. And then the sun set, and she stopped beating, and the music stopped. And then we were just back to misery again. but reliving that moment where it went from, I want to get off this truck, to I cannot believe I'm having this experience, and then being in that experience for a good 10 minutes. That was magical, and I would very much love to relive that.
Beautiful.
Guys, this has been fun. What do you think?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Very
Sure.
fun.
Yeah.
Shall we continue tomorrow?
Yes.
Let's continue at the next ETF. But it's been so great reconnecting with you and meeting some of you for the first time and some of you for the second time. So amazing.
And none of us for the last time.
None of you for the last time.
Good point.
Important.
And I'm glad that I'm the host because I don't know which moment I would pick. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
During my time at the Extraordinary Travel Festival in Bangkok, I had the chance to sit down with some truly amazing travelers. From exploring hidden corners of the world to taking on a personal challenge, their stories are as varied as they are fascinating. You can see more about the festival by going to extraordinarytravelfest.com. In the next interview episode from ETF, we're diving into the world of unconventional travel with 3 very special tour operators. Fadi, who's redefining tourism in Syria, Baba, who introduces adventurous souls to the hidden wonders of Mauritania, and David, who takes travelers deep into the cultures of Papua New Guinea. These are not your typical tourist destinations, and these guys are not your average tour operators. So make sure to follow the Radio Vagabond and get ready for some fascinating stories, passionate discussions, and insights into some of the world's most remarkable destinations in the next interview episode, coming very soon. Also, again, remember to send your Lost in Translation story, and preferably as a voice message. My name's Palabo, and I gotta keep moving. See ya!
Produced by RadioGuru.co.uk.